Hazel Carson alighted from the cab, waiting for the driver to get her bags for her. She didn't plan that she was going to be coming back here for this reason. Of all times to come back here, her father decided to let go of this world in thickest time of cold. Winter. She hated it more than anything, even more now than ever. She felt a light tap on her forearm, causing her to shake out of her long train of thoughts. "Miss, are you all right?" the driver asked, looking concerned. Nodding, she handed the fare to him and grabbed her bags. "I'm all right, thank you." Not paying him any attention anymore, she began to walk up to the porch of the house she had lived in for 18 years of her life. It wasn't like she wanted to care one bit about her father's death. She just couldn't leave it either. Her father was still the man who sang her lullabies to bed and made her hair in a bun, because she asked. When the call came in for her to come over, she felt numb all over. It took a while before she was able to snap out of it. Hazel stepped onto the porch and a wave of nostalgia washed over her. Everything looked exactly as she'd left it. The same worn wooden boards, polished to a soft sheen by years of footsteps. Her father's old rocking chair sat empty, yet still seemed to hold his presence, as if waiting for him to return and resume his gentle swaying. She was surprised that it was still this way, because Mia liked everything modern in the house. She raised her hand to knock when the door was suddenly opened. Mia, her stepmother, was still clad by her nightrobe, which hung loosely around her shoulders. Her hair looked so silky as tendrils fell forward on her face. "Oh, it's you." "Oh?" Hazel threw her a questioning glance. "Were you expecting someone else?" She looked behind her to see if anyone was coming, but there was no one. "Don't mind me, come in." She stepped backwards, giving Hazel room to carry her bags, but not offering assistance in any way. For someone who just lost her husband, Mia looked like she was having the best time of her life. "Finally decided to show up, huh?" Mia had her back to her as she closed the door. "Well, make yourself at home?" Again. Hazel heaved a sigh, doing her best to keep her mouth shut. She had done that before, so she was still capable of doing it again. As expected, Mia hadn't changed one bit. "My room." Mia turned to face her and shrugged. "I'm sure you still remember how to walk there." Hazel watched as Mia went over to the kitchen, humming a funky sound. Mia didn't look like someone who just lost her husband. She looked like someone who was ready to have fun. "Besides, we all handle grief differently," she muttered to herself, carrying her bags in the direction of her old room. The sight she met made her jaw fall. The room was a disaster on its own, all cluttered with several bags and dusty as the Saharan desert. "How could you just leave my room like this, Mia?" Hazel asked, as soon as she got to the kitchen. Mia slowly took another spoon of the ice cream she was taking and shrugged. "You left it, not me. Clean it up yourself. Maybe if you came home once in a while, it wouldn't be like this. But no. You were too busy with your own life." Hazel's anger flared. "No one wanted me here anyway. You made that clear years ago." "You chose to leave, remember?" "Of course, just the same way you chose to get all my father's attention from me. What's your angle? Tell me now, because now you have gotten him dead." Mia's face reddened as the cup of ice cream fell to the ground. "How dare you! I loved Charles and I took care of this family." "Love? You call this love? Leaving my room to rot, not taking care of him? That's not love, Mia. That's neglect. You have no right to judge me. You abandoned us, Hazel. You abandoned your father." Hazel's eyes welled up for the first time since she heard of her father's death. "I didn't abandon him. You drove me away, Mia. You and your perfect facade. I'm sure you've gotten what you wanted. He's dead, bravo." She began to clap and cheer Mia on. "You should watch what you say, smart pants. Maybe if your mother hadn't died." Mia sneered at her, hissing as she left Hazel alone in the kitchen. Few minutes later, Mia was out of the house as she slammed the door. It was only then that Hazel went on her knees, with her head bowed, and began to let go of the tears she thought she had kept reined in. Different thoughts ran through her head, making her head hurt all over. Would he have survived if she were here? Was there anything that could have been done with her presence? Dad! That single word was a plea that rang from her mouth as she recalled every single moment that they spent together. Why did you just go like that? Why? She continued to mutter to herself over and over again. Suddenly, she heard someone knock on the door. At first, she thought she was hearing things, but it happened again. She was in no mood to get herself up from the floor and go open the door. As Hazel wiped away her tears, the insistent knocking continued. She hesitantly approached the door, peering through the peephole to see a well-dressed man in his late 50s in a tailored navy blue shirt and a leather briefcase in his right hand. Seeing that he was looking like someone important, she quickly tried to compose herself before she opened the door. "Good afternoon. You must be Hazel." The man smiled the minute he saw her. "My name is Kevin Thompson, your father's lawyer. May I come in, please?" She simply nodded, stepping aside for him to enter. Then she closed the door shut. As she led him to the sitting room, she realized that he was scanning the whole area of the house as far as his eyes could carry. "I take it that Mia isn't home, right?" It was then she understood his tension. Given the way he spoke, it was like he didn't want to see her around. "She left the house not so long ago." "All right, Miss Hazel. I need to discuss with you about your father's estate and some important matters that require your attention. Are you feeling up to it, or should I come another time?" "It's all right." She tried to keep her face composed, not to reveal any emotions. "It's just that I just got back. As long as it won't be too long." Kevin opened his briefcase, pulling out a stack of documents. "Hazel, your father's will is quite specific. He's left you—" He paused, scanning the documents before continuing. "The Riverside Clinic, all its assets and associated properties. He's also bequeathed you his investments, securities, and personal belongings." Hazel's eyes widened as Kevin handed her a folder containing the documents. "Your father was very clear about his wishes, Hazel. He wanted you to have control and ownership of the clinic, ensuring his legacy continues." Her mind reeled. She had expected nothing, given her estrangement from her father. "But I don't know if I can run the clinic, Kevin. I have no experience. I just finished medical school." Kevin nodded understandingly. "Your father believed in you, Hazel. He left detailed instructions and a capable team to support you." Despite Kevin's reassurances, Hazel felt overwhelmed. She hadn't reconciled with her father's passing, and now she was faced with the daunting task of taking over his legacy. "Can't it be sold? I'd eventually have to go back to finish some things up at school. What if I just sell it to someone who'd make good use of the clinic?" "If you sell, ownership transfers to Mia, your stepmother." Hazel's gut twisted at the thought. She couldn't bear the idea of Mia profiting from her father's hard work. "What are my alternatives?" Hazel began to think about things that could be done in order to keep the clinic in check. She hasn't even been there for a long time. "You could hire a manager or partner with someone experienced," Kevin suggested, "or take time to learn and grow into the role. However, I'd personally advise that you disguise yourself as a staff first." That caught Hazel's attention. "Why do you say so?" "Before your father died, he mentioned that there were some corrupt practices going on in the clinic, but before he could do anything, his heart condition worsened terribly, leaving it unresolved. If you just go in as the director now, you might not find out." Hazel took in a deep breath as she replayed what the lawyer had said. If she decides to go back to her life, Mia would make a mess of what her father had taken years to build. If she stays, she'd have to be extra sensitive to what goes on in the company. "Can I have some time to think about it? Of course, just bear in mind that if you delay, the clinic is at risk." She nodded slowly, taking in his words. "But how would I get a job there?" "Leave that to me. That is super easy. I'd like to know your decision as soon as you have decided. Here is my card." He handed over a card that had purple slashed over it. "That's my business card. Just a call would do." With that, he rose to his feet, ready to leave. Hazel rose too as she followed him to the door. "Thank you, Mr. Thompson. I'm grateful." "It's nothing. Take care of yourself and I'd be expecting your call." And he was out of the house already. She walked back to the kitchen, grabbed a cup of ice cream and walked back to the sitting room still thinking. Her phone vibrated in her pocket, bringing her to check her phone for the first time that day. It was a message from one of her colleagues from college. She was there when Hazel got the news about her father's death, so she texted to ask if she had gotten home safely. Hazel typed a quick reply, sent it, and switched off her phone immediately. She just wanted all the rest that she could get. "Your father believed in you, Hazel." She didn't doubt that one bit. Every first day of the week, her father would text her a good morning message, encouraging her and asking about her well-being. But she would only reply a few times because she felt she wasn't welcomed around him, and Mia made it worse. The cup of ice cream was sitting gently on her lap. It wasn't until she picked up the lawyer's business card before she remembered it. Taking a big scoop, she flicked the card a couple of times before putting her phone on again. Her father's death made her realize how much he loved her. Even till his death, there was only one way to make sure that he'd be smiling from heaven. She quickly typed out a message and sent it to the lawyer. All she had to do now was prepare everything that would be needed for her new job, and that meant she had to sort out everything in the room to keep it tidy. "Nice one, Mia. Nice one," she muttered, taking more spoons of ice cream. Her eyes wandered to the portrait of her father that was placed next to the television, and she began to cry again. It wasn't until the next week that Hazel was asked to resume her job at her father's clinic. Initially, she feared that there would be an issue with her name, but Kevin was quick to remind her that her father didn't go by Charles Carson anymore. Ever since her mum died, he had changed it. For the past 1 week that Hazel had been back in her father's house, she only crossed paths with Mia, twice. She often came back at midnight, drunk to stupor. She wondered what her father ever saw in her. If her mother were alive, her father wouldn't even look Mia in the eye. Her earliest memories of her mother was her mother's warm smile before fate cruelly snatched her away when she was just 3. Her father was completely heartbroken. She remembered the times she'd walk into a room to see him crying, while her mother's picture. Not long after that, he threw himself into creating something new, pouring his grief in it. Years passed, and the Riverside Clinic flourished beyond his expectations. She grew up watching him work tirelessly, day and night. She spent hours playing in the clinic's halls with a dream to be like him. Then everything suddenly changed. Her father met Mia, who was a patient at the clinic. She remembered how her father would spend time with Mia instead of her. Mia, who was extremely stunning, left her dad drooling each time. As they became much closer, a 13-year-old Hazel was completely sidelined. She watched as Mia would constantly play on her father's love, combined with her awful remarks when it came to her. Her father, caught in the middle, struggled to balance his love between both of them. Despite Mia's influence, he still cherished her and encouraged her to follow in his footsteps. She was eager to please her father, so she did everything needed from her. Until her father finally disclosed that he'd be marrying Mia, she was deeply hurt and angry, even though she saw it coming. Her father loved her, but he became distant, and she couldn't help it. She loved him deeply and missed him more than anything. Looking in the mirror, she tried to smile, telling her subconscious that if she began to cry now, she wouldn't be able to make it to work. Her bag, containing her brush, safety pin, lipstick, and some cash, was sitting on her bed. Looking around the room, she smiled because it took her a lot of effort to bring the room to what it is now. Hazel Carson silently said a word of prayer in her heart and made her way out of the house to meet up with the opening of the clinic. On getting to the clinic, she was surprised as she marveled at how beautiful it was. The last time she was here, there was nothing much for infrastructure, but now she was glad and proud of her father. Hazel started as a medical records clerk, learning the ropes and assisting wherever needed. She was paired up with a senior in the field, who taught her how to file and maintain patient records, and also retrieve files. For someone in her field, she never knew about what other staff of a hospital or clinic went through. Being in the clinic opened her eyes to see what was really happening in the field. "Hi, Hazel. Thank you for those books. You are a godsend." Amy, one of the nurses, dropped by after the day's work. "How come you have those books? I've looked for them everywhere." "Don't mention. I just happen to have them. What about your colleague? Was she able to sort out everything?" Amy shrugged. "You give yourself too much of a headache, you know. I can't count how many people you have assisted since you came here. Some of them don't even value it. It doesn't matter if they do or not, as long as the problem is solved. I see that you are ready to go." "We had a lot of patients today. I'm surprised that I'm still standing. Why are you still here, though? You should have been done with your work like an hour ago or so." Amy checked the phone, nodding. "I'm waiting for Lily. I should walk her to the bus stop since it's getting late." "You and Lily again. The friendship you share with her is unique, even despite her age," Amy commented, as Hazel smiled, glancing at the hallway to see if Lily was coming. "I'm leaving. See you tomorrow." "I've told you not to wait for me again. I might be in my late 60s, that doesn't mean I can't walk or do other things." Lily chided Hazel, who was surprised that she was done. Lily was one of the people that she felt incredibly drawn to. She was a slender woman, yet had a sturdy build. Her silver hair was cut in a short, curly bob that perfectly fit her heart-shaped face. And more often than none, she preferred to wear floral print blouses that complemented her skin tone. Hazel carried her handbag, putting it across her chest, and brought her attention back to Lily. "You don't get to tell me what to do, Mom." "Let's just go. You act so much like my grandson. If it were up to me, I'd stay in that house, huddled under covers, doing nothing all day." "I'd very much prefer that. Being a janitor is stressful as it is." They walked out of the clinic together, turning left to the street. "That's why you have backaches every time." "Life wasn't always like this, Hazel. I used to be a nurse at the clinic and everything went well, but the owner died." Hazel glanced at her with curiosity written all over her face. "How did that affect you?" "You know David, right?" Hazel nodded eagerly. She knew David very well because he had been itching to point out all her mistakes lately. "He became the head doctor and made me choose between letting go of my job as a nurse at the clinic or being a janitor." "What on earth did he do that for?" Hazel halted, angered by what Lily had said. "That's not right." Lily put her hand on Hazel's forearm. "It's nothing, child. Just let it go." Hazel closed her eyes and took in deep breaths. "I can go to the bus stop on my own. Now go along." Hazel did as Lily said, but she couldn't stop thinking about how she was treated unfairly. The weeks passed by quickly and Hazel was able to settle in very well. She hadn't seen Mia for weeks on end, and she wasn't about to bother about someone who would still talk down on her. Her day began quite early as she was needed to be at the clinic to sort things out. She started by reviewing patient files and preparing for the morning's appointments. As she sipped her iced Americano, she began to plan out certain schedules for David Feist, the head doctor. He had been making her do some of his assistant's work for a while now, not that she complained. Throughout the morning, she assisted the nurses and some doctors by fetching records and preparing exam rooms. It wasn't until her stomach growled that she remembered that she hadn't eaten anything solid, so she made her way to the cafeteria, where other staff were. As Hazel balanced her tray, scanning the cafeteria for a quiet spot, she sighted Lily not so far from where she stood. "Everyone, gather around. I have an important announcement," the head doctor announced, garnering the attention of everyone at the cafeteria. Hazel's eyes met Lily's, who beckoned her to come over. David cleared his throat, surveying the room with a self-important gaze. "As you know, our clinic's reputation relies on trust and integrity. Unfortunately, I've discovered a betrayal of that trust. It has come to my attention that medical supplies have gone missing." There were a series of gasps that echoed through the cafeteria, alongside murmurings from others. I was also shocked myself because we don't do that here. Everyone knows that we stand for the truth. That made me do a little bit of investigation, and it seems Hazel's excessive kindness was just a ruse to get to us. She's been stealing from us all this while." Another round of gasps echoed round the room as she felt their stares bore into her own body. Her face burned with anger, but she remained frozen, unable to say a word. David sneered, "I'm sure some of you are shocked, but I'm not. I've seen her overly friendly behaviour, always trying to gain attention." He looked round the room with a smug smile on his face. "I wanted to let her go, but I guess this is a better way." Hazel stood frozen, her tray still clutched in her hand as David's words hung in the air. The cafeteria fell silent as all eyes were on her. David's gaze lingered on her, expecting a reaction. But Hazel's expression remained neutral. She simply just shook her head. Without a word, she turned and walked away, her tray still in hand. The room erupted into whispers and murmurs, but Hazel didn't flinch. She pushed through the doors, leaving the cafeteria and its judgmental glances behind. Her footsteps were measured as she walked up to her station, still silent. "Hazel, wait." She heard Lily call her, but she didn't reduce her pace. Neither did she look back. She disappeared into the hospital's corridors, leaving everything behind. Her silence makes everyone think that she was really the one who stole the medical supplies, but she didn't care. From that day on, she received snide remarks, sorrowful and rude gazes from some nurses. Some of them didn't allow her to give them any of the medical records needed, because according to them, they didn't want their patients' information stolen. Lily and other nurses made sure to let her know that they had her back and wouldn't allow this head doctor to spoil her image. They didn't know the reason why Hazel allowed people to believe that she stole the medical supplies. Just a few weeks after her arrival, she had noticed that there were some funds that were removed from the clinic's account that were used to do nothing. It wasn't like she had planned to check, but the files landed on her desk because David, the head doctor, wanted to use her as his assistant again. She called Kevin and told him about her findings. He, on the other hand, told her to lay low so as not to allow anyone to find out who she was. That wasn't a problem for Hazel. Now that she had been accused, David brought a lot of work to her desk, wanting her to complain, but as usual she gave him a sweet smile. He didn't know that he was helping her. Her ears were always open to hear any gossip or information that the nurses carried among themselves. It was from there that she confirmed that some nurses were receiving more pay because the head doctor liked them, while others received peanuts, unknowingly to them. The iron would be striked hot, so she had to wait until the right time before she would do anything. An opportunity would surely pose itself soon. All she just had to do was to wait. But it wasn't easy to just stand still when she could just barge in action, saying she's the daughter of Charles. It just wasn't time yet to do any of that. "Dad, I wish you were still here. Maybe all this would be taken care of neatly. I miss you." She mumbled up to her father wherever he was. It was easier to just do that. Friday evening after work, Hazel walked alongside Lily, who whined earlier that she could walk to the bus stop by herself. She immediately told her that she was going to decide whether she liked it or not. "My grandson would be around to spend the weekend with me. He's finally taking a break from that high-stress finance job to spend some quality time with his old grandma." Lily beamed like she had just gotten the best seats at the cinema. "He's such a sweet boy, always making me proud." Hazel smiled, familiar with Lily's fondness for her grandson. "How's he doing? Still working hard?" "Yes, he's doing well, but I worry about him. He's so focused on his career, never takes time for himself, or a social life for that matter." Hazel chuckled at the mention of not having time for social life. "You mean he's still not settled down?" "No, and it worries me. He's 27 years old, Hazel. When will he find a nice girl and give me great-grandchildren?" "Give him time, Lily. He'll find someone special." Lily shook her head. "I hope so. Anyway, I want to bake his favorite cake and make some sweets. He still has a sweet tooth, just like his grandfather." "I'd love to help you bake, Lily. It'll be fun. It's been a very long while since I've done anything of such. And bother you again? No. You should rest since you have the weekend to rest. I'd do just fine on my own. Hazel sighed, clutching her bag tighter. Can you just allow me something for you once, every time you want me to rest and do nothing? Why don't you play outdoor games tomorrow? Hazel shot her a look as the elderly woman smiled, pointing to the bus stop. There was no further discussion on it as Lily made her way, waiting for the bus. The next day, Hazel stood before the beautiful bungalow that boasted a cheerful yellow facade, which was complemented by nice flower beds and a clean green lawn. A winding stone path led to the front door, decorated with a welcoming wreath. She took in the sight of the house delightfully before moving on to knock. Her knock was answered by a surprised Lily, who opened the door with a flower-dusted apron round her waist. That was the exact expression I knew you would make. Forget that. How did you get here? I'm sure I haven't described where I stay. Hazel smiled involuntarily. I asked Nurse Thompson and she generously provided your address. She also said something like, "You are so famous and I'd find my way in no time." Lily's expression turned sheepish. Well, I suppose I can't turn you away. Come on in, dear. As she stepped in, her nose was quick to carry the enticing aromas of sweet treats and fresh coffee that reminded her of her father. Her eyes began to water almost immediately. What's wrong? Are you all right? The tears rushed forth shamelessly as Lily held her. As she opened her mouth to speak, she sighted a picture just by the wall and had to blink to be sure she wasn't hallucinating. How come you have that picture? Was that you years ago? Lily took a glance at where Hazel's gaze led to and nodded, wondering how that was related to her tears. I have a picture just like that. My father said it was my babysitter's picture and that we were so close. Wait, who's your father? Charles Swisher. Lily stepped back in shock as her eyes widened. She took another look at the lady before her, reflecting on what she had just said. It was then everything clicked. Hazel, Charles Swisher was the man who gave me a job as a nurse when I needed it. How did I fail to recognize you after taking care of you for such a long time? Hazel began to tear up again as she walked over to Lily and hugged her tight. I didn't recognize you either. Oh, child, I'm so sorry about his death. I'm so sorry. Lily whispered into her ears and Hazel continued to let all her tears out. They stayed in that position for a while before Hazel let go. Your father was like my son. I'd lost mine in an accident years ago, but your father filled up that void up until his death. I'm sorry, Hazel. Can I have some coffee? Of course. Let's go to the kitchen then. Lily led Hazel to the kitchen where she sighted a flour-covered counter and mixing bowls that revealed that Lily had started baking. Don't mind the mess. I'm making his favourite chocolate cake and some sugar cookies. Lily poured her some coffee in a pink cup and gently placed it in her hands. Thank you, Lily. Hazel took a sip and sighed dreamingly. My dad loved fresh coffee. Every morning he'd make some for himself. It wasn't until I got older that he allowed me to take a little. He was always like that, I remember. But tell me, your father owns the clinic. Why are you working as a medical records clerk? You should take over. I remember your father told me that you were in medical school. Hazel took another sip of her coffee, allowing it to swirl round her tongue. I can't take over until I find who is behind the fraudulent activities in the clinic. That was why you decided to join as a staff and see for yourself. Hazel nodded, about to speak when there was a knock on the door. Lily quickly excused herself and suddenly there was a man's voice that went round the room, meaning that her grandson was around. Making sure that she looked presentable, she walked into the sitting room to find them hugging. As they let go of each other, the man straightened himself, and their eyes met. Hi, you must be Hazel. She wouldn't stop talking about you recently. Forgive my manners, I'm Tom. He stretched his hand out for a handshake and she took it. What she didn't expect was for Tom to look so handsome that even the handshake made her insides turn to jelly. Hazel didn't plan to spend her weekend hanging out with Tom, Lily's grandson, but it just happened. He had taken her to an amusement park on Sunday, after which they went back to Lily's place for a quick lunch. For a moment she wished that the weekend could last longer than it already did. She couldn't remember the last time she laughed so heartily, even before her father's death. However, the next day rushed quickly, leaving her wanting more of the weekend, but she had to face reality, as she was to be at work. She was already at her desk at her usual time with her iced Americano, sorting out some files when two nurses greeted her before proceeding to stand just by her desk. "I told you that she was his girlfriend, but you didn't believe me. Did you see the clothes she wore? She must have spent a fortune on her." The first nurse giggled like a high schooler. "They were literally all over each other a while ago despite it being so early. I think her name is Mia or something. It's none of my business, though. I don't want any issues with him." The first nurse sighed, gazing in the direction of the entrance of the clinic. "Let's go see if they are still there." As they waddled up to the entrance, Hazel was a bit curious too about David's girlfriend. Seeing that she could just quickly peek and return, she made her way to the entrance. She hadn't gotten to the entrance yet when her legs froze in its place. There she was, Mia, her late father's wife and her stepmother, giving the head doctor, David Feist, kisses on his lips. David held her so tight, like he wouldn't be able to let her go. Her legs felt so weak, and she didn't trust them to carry her back to her desk. If they were this chummy together, it meant it had been going on for a long while even before her father's death. Mia hadn't been home in weeks, meaning that she was definitely staying at David's place. She closed her eyes for a minute and made her way back to her desk. Something needed to be done. She thought long and hard about what to do, but nothing of importance came to mind. If she confronted David privately, he'd do all within his power to shut her off and probably put more accusations against her. There were certain things she also noticed about the activities going on in the clinic. Her position made it possible for her to review patients' files, and she noticed some excessive charges for unnecessary procedures. One of the patient's bills for a simple consultation was inflated with costly tests and medications that the patient didn't need. One time she had an opportunity to be in a meeting where a new medication was promoted at the clinic. It wasn't until later that she discovered that there was a lucrative contract between the clinic and the pharmaceutical company with incentives for each prescription. This wasn't made known to the nurses and some other doctors either. David was indeed at the center of it all. She remembered when a new nurse was brought to work and she watched as the nurse was struggling to administer a simple medication. At first, she thought that it was due to her being nervous until Lily told her that she was David's third cousin and the girl was clearly inexperienced. Lily had informed her previously about a time when there were discrepancies in a patient's file and how the doctor later admitted to altering the records to cover up the medical error, and he wasn't punished or anything of the sort. There were things that she needed to take care of as soon as possible. She picked up her phone and quickly sent a text to Kevin, requesting that he advise her. He was one person that she could trust, because her father really trusted him. "You okay? I saw you dazed a minute ago," one of the nurses asked as she was about to pass by. Hazel smiled as her heart warmed at the way people were still concerned about her. "I'm all right, thank you." The nurse nodded and went her way. Ever since the incident at the cafeteria, some nurses gave her the cold shoulder, while some checked up on her every now and then. It seemed like they knew that she didn't do what she was accused of. She went about her daily activities, making sure she had the right reports and files. It was lunchtime when her phone buzzed in her pocket. Checking it, she smiled. Kevin had texted her, saying that he'd be at the clinic soon. According to him, almost all the staff knew him as Charles's lawyer and also the person in charge of anything involving law and the court. His presence was highly important for what would happen soon. The next few minutes passed and she met him at the entrance of the clinic. "You said something about letting everyone know. Do we have to call a meeting or what?" "The cafeteria is quite full now. Let's use that to our advantage. Those who aren't there would get the news on time because there'd be a lot of side talks." They made their way to the cafeteria and Hazel could feel everyone's eyes on them. "Good day, everyone. May I get your attention? Kevin waited, allowing their attention to be on him solely. I'm sure many of you know who I am. If you don't, I'm Mr. Kevin Thompson, late Mr. Charles's lawyer. I don't mean to take too much of your time, but Mr. Charles left a will stating that all his properties be given to Miss Hazel. The almost quiet cafeteria became noisier than ever because of the shocking news. That isn't possible. Charles's daughter can't be Hazel. I'm sure of that. I don't know what you were playing at, David charged at Hazel and Kevin, huffed up. Did you bother to check his table ever since his death? You didn't even tell anyone to clean up his office. I'm Hazel Carson, and his will is written here in his writing and his signature is there. The whole room went quiet again, the murmurs subsiding as they waited to see what would come next. David's eyes narrowed. That's not possible. Charles would never leave the clinic to... He glanced at Hazel with disdain written all over his face. You're just a stranger claiming to be his daughter. Anyone can forge a will. I assure you, David, this is genuine. Kevin, show him the will again. Kevin hesitated, then handed David the document. David scanned it, checking every word over and over again. This could be a fake, David insisted. Charles's handwriting was distinctive. I've seen it countless times. This could be a forgery. David, stop denying the truth. My father's lawyer verified the will's authenticity. You're just trying to protect your own interests. The room fell silent, awaiting David's response. His eyes darted between Hazel and Kevin, and he sighed angrily. His daughter just finished from medical college. You might want to step out and call Mia. She'd be able to explain if I'm his daughter or not. David took a step back, realizing that all of it was actually true. Can we go to a private place and talk? His voice became subdued as he moved closer to her. David, your actions have compromised patient care and betrayed my father's legacy. You're fired. Effective immediately. David's mask of charm crumbled, revealing a desperate man. Hazel, please. We can work through this. I'll do anything. I'll make it right. I promise. Your anything has harmed innocent people. You've exploited this clinic for personal gain. It's too late for apologies. His face turned red as he realized his charm had worn off. You'll regret this, Hazel. I've built relationships, connections. You can't just dismiss me. Wait. Explain the accusations that you made against me. Were they true or not? Should I go on to how the clinic has funded your vacations with your whore? And it's not even accounted for. You ripped my father off of what he built and even had the audacity to take over his wife. So, watch me do this. As security guards approached, David looked around and lounged towards Hazel, but the security guards were quick to get him away from her. You'll pay for this, Hazel. Mark my words. Hazel didn't flinch. I'm not afraid of you, David. You've underestimated me for the last time. Everyone watched as David was escorted out of the cafeteria and couldn't believe what was happening. I understand the shock and confusion surrounding my true identity. I'd like to explain why I disguised myself as a new employee. This might not be the time and place, as we all need to get back to our work as fast as possible. However, I'd just give a quick rundown. She took a deep breath before saying more. After my father's passing, I was given the will by Kevin, who explained that I was now the person to take over the clinic. Believe me, I wasn't interested one bit, because I was still not used to the fact that my father was dead. But when I was told that there were some irregularities in the clinic's affairs, I knew I needed to step up. By assuming a new identity, I could observe and gather evidence without alerting those responsible. Hazel paused, scanning the room. I was appalled by the corruption, negligence, and exploitation I witnessed. Patients were being harmed, and my father's legacy was being tarnished. I knew I had to act. David's actions in particular were alarming. His greed and disregard for patient care compelled me to take drastic measures. By working alongside him, I gathered evidence of his wrongdoing. I understand some of you may feel deceived or betrayed. Please know my intention was never to harm or manipulate. I sought to protect this clinic its patience, and my father's dream. As Hazel finished speaking, the room erupted into thunderous applause. Staff members rose from their seats, whistling and cheering. The tension and skepticism dissipated and was immediately replaced by admiration and gratitude. Dr. Patel, a respected physician, approached Hazel beaming. "Hazel, your bravery and determination are inspiring. You've saved this clinic from ruin. I'm glad your father made you take over. I'm looking forward to working with you on how to move the clinic forward." One by one, several nurses and doctors congratulated her and the effort she put into investigating all that was happening. Hazel was quite surprised by the reactions she had gotten. She expected them to have mixed feelings, but what she didn't know was that most of them knew what David and some other doctors were doing, but because of fear, they couldn't do anything. She stood by Kevin's side, watching as the cafeteria was getting empty little by little. "It turned out quite well, I guess." She glanced at Kevin, who was grinning from ear to ear. "It did. Let me congratulate you on your appointment of becoming the head doctor of Riverside Clinic. It should have happened much earlier, but I guess it just had to be this way." "Thank you, Kevin. It wouldn't have been possible if not for your contribution. Don't let me keep you here." She motioned towards the door, realizing that he would have other things to do. "I'd reach out to you concerning some other things that would need to get sorted out too," she continued as they walked out of the clinic. "Congratulations once again, Hazel. You deserve this." Kevin smiled as he made his way to the cab that was waiting for him. Hazel was already walking back into the clinic when she heard someone call her name, and as she turned, it was Mia. She wore a black leather bodycon that had a V-shaped neckline, showing her cleavage much. A Hermes bag was on her shoulder and she wore her Jimmy Choo. Her eyes widened in alarm as her voice trembled slightly. "Hazel, what are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing, Mia. What are you doing here, because I know you never came here to see my father when he was alive?" "What do you mean? I'm just asking because you ought to be at school. Why are you still here?" Hazel smiled, shaking her head. "If you had come to the house just once, you'd have known that I never left at all. But I realized that you must have been chilling at David's house." "That's such a harsh accusation. I just knew David from a long time back, and I didn't come home because it reminded me too much of Charles." "Save your cock and bull story for someone else, Mia. Tell me, why would you kiss him like there was no tomorrow? You weren't even ashamed to kiss him out in public. I also went through the clinic's account and found out that he had been sending you money from the clinic's fund, even before my father fell ill." Mia looked sideways, putting her hand on her head. "It isn't what you think. Just let me give an explanation. Same thing your boyfriend tried to do earlier, not that I'm interested anyway." Hazel clasped her hands together like she was praying. "I'm sure you've come to see him. You should call him because he's no longer working here." Mia suddenly walked up to Hazel, holding her hands. "What do you mean by he's no longer working here? He's the head doctor of this clinic." "He was. Not anymore, Mia. My father willed the clinic to me, Mia. I'm now the head doctor. Please do well to tell him to come get his belongings before the end of the week. If he doesn't, it will end up in the bin." She turned towards the clinic, heading inside, leaving Mia too stunned to utter a word. A week had passed since the tumultuous events at the clinic. Hazel had successfully ousted David and Mia, and a sense of calm had returned. She had begun her executive duties after the whole issue was sorted out. She called for a meeting the past weekend, where there were a series of discussions on how to improve the clinic and also the well-being of the staff. Knowing that it was impossible for her to do it alone, she also asked for their advice. The weekend got much better when Tom asked if she could join him for dinner. She agreed quickly, knowing it was something she so much wanted. He gave her several pieces of advice on how she could manage the clinic funds, start compulsory savings for staff, and how to calculate profit. One thing that struck her about him was the way he listened to her. He wouldn't even interrupt her once. Instead, he waited until she was done before asking questions. It was another new week, and she was concerned about one thing. When she had told Mia that she was now the head doctor, she didn't really mean it. There were a lot of things that were to be put in place, things that she felt she couldn't handle. "Lily, can I talk to you for a moment?" Hazel asked, standing by the entrance of the room where Lily was taken care of. Lily glanced at the doorway, nodding. "Of course, Hazel." "I've been thinking. With the clinic's new direction, I'd like to offer you the position of head doctor." Lily's hands hung midway as she blinked her eyes like she wasn't seeing right. "Me? Head doctor? Oh, Hazel, you're joking. I know nothing when it comes to being a head doctor. After all, it's not my name in the will. It's yours, dear." Hazel's expression remained serious. "I'm completely serious, Lily. You're an exceptional doctor, and the staff respects you." Lily shook her head, still chuckling. "I'm flattered, but I'm not suited for such an important role. I'm happy being a janitor." "Remember that my father trusted you to be a nurse. Now I'm trusting you to do better. I believe that you can do better than that time." Lily stopped what she was doing completely, giving Hazel her full attention. "It's been a long time since that happened, dear. I'm serious when I say I'm not suited for such." Hazel saw sense in what Lily was saying. Times had changed, and she couldn't take on the role as she would have been able to. "I'm always here, dear. If there's something that you believe that you need help on, come here. I'd do my best to help in any way that I can." "What about Tom? We discussed how to manage the clinic's finances, but I'm not so good in that area. I'd need his help." Lily beamed. "You both are like two peas in a pod. I'm so proud of what you share, Hazel. He mentioned a few things on ways he could help, so I suggest that you work with him in that aspect. That way there wouldn't be too much workload on you. Now hurry along. I'm sure you have things to do." Hazel did a little victory dance before going into the room and giving Lily a hug. "I'll see what can be done and don't miss me too much." She sauntered out of the room with her phone in hand as she texted Tom on the latest development. They were a great duo. 6 months later, Hazel stood before the mirror, watching as her wedding gown shimmered in the soft light. She gazed at her reflection, thinking of how the past 6 months went by. The clinic's transformation to becoming known worldwide due to several surgeries that were carried out by the exceptional surgeons, Lily's decision to stop working as a janitor and finally rest, Tom's unwavering support, and her own personal journey. There were times when it seemed like she went away from everyone due to stress, but Tom, her ever-patient man, would calmly call her back. At a point, David actually carried out his threats by going to other clinics and trying to spoil the relationship that Riverside Clinic had with them, but he was greatly disappointed. She would have taken legal action against him and Mia after the incident just to get closure, but it was of no use. Her father wouldn't have wanted that. Her eyes dropped to the ring on her finger, a stunning platinum band designed with a radiant diamond and 2 smaller sapphires. The sapphires reminded her of how her father would play with her, with glitter, not minding the ones that got on his body. She was often reminded of her childhood memories ever since her dad died. It hurt her that he wasted his time and efforts on Mia, who never deserved any of it. As she gazed at the ring, a lump formed in her throat. She remembered the struggles, the tears and triumphs that she encountered during this short period. He wasn't there physically, but it was like he was guiding her each step of the way. Hazel's vision blurred, and she fought back tears. She recalled the day she confronted David and Mia, the moment she claimed her rightful place at the clinic. It didn't seem like she'd survive all those times, but she did, and she survived better than anyone would imagine. With a deep breath, Hazel lifted her gaze upwards. "Dad, your baby girl is doing good. I really wish you were here to walk me down the Isla like a proud father would do." She took a final glance at the ring, the sapphires sparkling like her father's eyes. "I'll keep making you proud, Dad. I promise." A final glance at herself in the mirror, she picked up her bouquet and walked out of the room. Less than an hour later, she shared a kiss with the love of her life. "Till we grow old and our hairs are grey, we'll be together." Tom kissed her again, holding her in his arms. She met the one person who knew her like she wanted, someone who heard her even when she didn't speak, Someone who would tear every mountain down if she asked. "Till we grow old?" she muttered to herself, holding him tight. Months ago, if she was told that she'd feel so much at peace, she wouldn't have believed it one bit.